What's good, everybody? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another YouTube collaboration. Want to give you brothers a round of applause for checking out this episode. So, wait for the sound effect there. All right, and today, man, I'm here with my uncle.
Okay,
He's one of the more talented guys in the space. Underrated, but I'm gonna let him explain who he is and what his channel is about.
all right, man. Appreciate for you having me on, O'Shea. My little nephew, definitely doing it big out there. I like to say again, my name is D. Derell. I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm also a business owner within the profession of mental health, in which I own a private practice, and I own a couple of behavioral groups and facilities that provide mental health services to the community throughout the Houston area. I also have a mental health institution that focuses on adult mental health clients that are severely mentally ill. I also have a group home in which I provide um, housing services for adult males, Black males that have issues with keeping housing due to their mental illness, preventing them from maintaining long-term housing to manage their symptoms, their medication, and also assessing them to community resources. So I've been on YouTube, guys. For those that have been familiar with me, I've been on YouTube since 2017 as far as creating content. I've been following my boy O'Shea since like 15, 16, and so on. And so my content, I have two channels. I have Derell Life Solutions that pretty much fundamentally covers mental health issues. It's not as entertaining, but it focuses. If you're wanting to learn about mental health, if you're wanting to learn about things that, hey, maybe you may be experiencing or somebody else, and you like to know the proper terminology, usage, proper treatment, just different concepts of psychology, mental health, go to Derell Life Solutions, and I can provide an endless amount of information as it relates to mental health in your community and things that I observe on YouTube. Also, guys, you can check out my Derell The Rebirth, which is more of a all-around type of channel that focuses on stuff that's going on in the manosphere, in the pro-Black sector. For those that support Umar Johnson, I'm an avid Umar Johnson supporter, and so forth. So I talk a lot about that stuff. I talk about just a variety of things that happen in Black YouTube and social media. I'm usually streaming a lot on that channel. I had some issues with it because it was connected to another channel that got taken down for hate speech, I guess. But for overall, those are the two channels that I pretty much rock with. And as you know, I have another channel that's a music channel where all of the music that I do that you may hear on Derell Rebirth, I posted on that channel. If you want to check it out, you can go to that channel, Derell Sounds, and you can check out any of the tracks that I create as far as music wise and so forth. So that's pretty much me. Appreciate you, for allowing me to have a chance to express myself. Again, guys, you all can check me out. Subscribe and share. Appreciate you for the support.
Okay, and thank you for coming. I know you're a busy person, but a lot of times, before, and shout out to the I used to always see you in the comments. You had like a 15-piece suit on at the time.
Yeah, that was at the beginning.
He was always warm, brother, in that suit. And but it was, shout out to the Information Man. Maybe we could put him on the screen here. The Information Man show was a very talented African American content creator out of Sacramento. He was the first time that I knew that you were. I'm like, man, that's Derell from the comment section. I had no idea that you were a Black male therapist in dealing with mental disorders. And there's only one other brother I know that I just did a show with out of North Carolina, and that was two. And to have one of our guys from the African American community that deals with, mental illness in patients, bipolar disorder, PTSD and things like that. And then I want to kind of talk about today. We're talking about DMX.
Okay.
Because DMX, guys like Tyrese, although we can't necessarily, I have my intuition about him, but
Tyrese has shown some suspicious behavior. Yeah, on social media, he's done some outlandish things that would suggest that there may be issues.
Right. But we do know about guys like Terrell Owens for sure, and we see these African American men that are talented. And with DMX, we know that he's having he's fighting for his life right now,
right,
as we currently speak. Dealing a lot of times with drugs, and been dealing with that issue since he was about 14, 15, here on and out. Right. And then a lot of black men, when we talk about certain issues like mental health for black men and their problems, for the women, it seems like people are so concerned. But when it comes about black men, it's almost like, oh, you can get over with, you can deal with it, whatever's happened to you is okay, you know, and now it's time to move on. But how does somebody like DMX, with all the talent in the world, all the money that he can get and all the stuff, how come he can't get the kind of help that he needs with those past issues he experienced coming up in his childhood?
Well, the biggest thing when you must understand, and I tell people that ask me questions in regards to athletes and people who are very successful, we think they have it all. We think because people are successful, that means that eludes them of any flaw that we would have or anybody else. And success does not elude you of mental illness. It doesn't elude you of making other personal decisions and mistakes, or developing any type of mental illness that can somewhat hinder your ability long term. And so when we look at the evolution of DMX as being a entertainer, as a rapper, one of the best rappers ever, and so on, and to where he's at now, we have to look at the overall totality of this man as a person, from his development as a child up until him as an adult as he is now. We must understand, he came out personally and talked about a story of how he was tricked into doing crack or doing cocaine. I think it was cocaine. And so what we're seeing is, to me, a situation growing up in the type of environments that he was involved in. He was exposed to a lot of things at an early age in which children are not equipped mentally to handle. Therefore, he went into a lot of different directions. You also will see situations that would be indicative of a poor value system as far as ascertaining what is right and wrong, what is in the best interest of himself. I don't know a whole lot about his family, so to speak, but I do know that DMS did have issues with his oldest son, and he had some other issues in regards to the relationships and the connectivity emotionally with his children and the wives that he had and so forth. So when we look at DMX from a psychodynamic standpoint, he has always had difficulty maintaining and developing close relationships with people who are close to him as far as family and friends. Part of that could be part of him having mental health issues, and also the fact that he has substance abuse issues that basically has ran rampant throughout his life. And what we'll find is that it's very difficult when you have a mental illness that is comorbid with substance abuse, okay? Because when you look at having alcohol abuse, marijuana, cannabis, cocaine, and other barbiturates and so forth, you, as a therapist, as a clinician, we have to assess what would be the primary diagnosis, what would be the primary issue to deal with. In most cases, we look at the fact of the substance abuse issue first, because it's very difficult to treat mental illness knowing that there's a co-occurring issue going on that is not being handled. So we want to get you clean. We want to get you to the point where you have detoxed off of the drug, learn to live without the drug at some point, and at the same time, parallel to that or in conjunction to that, we focus on the mental health issues, because they kind of bridge hand in hand. Because a lot of times with substance abusers, they may use drugs to deter away from the fact that they can't manage their mental illness. And in many instances, people who have drug addictions also would develop mental illness. The fact that it could be substance abuse induced. I mean, there's a such thing as it could be alcohol-induced psychosis and so forth. There's all types of drugs and substances, psychedelic drugs and so forth that can induce psychotic and mood issues and so forth. You know, alcohol is a depressant. So those things kind of go hand in hand. As a clinician, you have to be skilled in assessing those behaviors and the psychosocial history as it relates to what happened, the event that it happened, the episodes, how often it happened within 3 to 6 months and so forth, before you come with a clinical impression to decide what type of treatment planning he needs and what type of issues would need to be assessed first. But when we look at DMX, we're looking at a longitudinal effect prior to him becoming famous.
Right.
He had substance abuse issues.
Okay, let's talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's important.
Right.
Talk about that again. Say that one more time.
Prior to DMX becoming famous, he had these same issues. The problem is that people think because you come into money and you come into fame, that means that it's supposed to in some way decrease this from happening, when actually fame and these things can magnify the problem. And it's quite obvious when you look at the development of this issue for DMX, the money, the fame, the women, everything that comes along with it, people treating you differently, it only magnified the drug abuse. It only magnified the mental illness. And so in our essence, DMX had these issues prior to him ever writing a rhyme or being put on by Def Jam and so forth.
Okay, let me talk to you about this because a lot of black men that don't get to the level of DMX, but Winston Churchill was what someone would consider to be a functional alcoholic. The former prime minister of the United Kingdom. Although he's very talented, he's very bright, he can function at a high level, still being on drugs or on alcohol. There's guys who can do that. Some guys can't. Some people can.
Right.
With a lot of black men that have those issues, and obviously, if you don't get help, sometimes you feel that you are strong enough that you can just overcome it. And we know a lot of black men don't like to go to the hospital, don't like to go to the doctor. I'm about to be a doctor myself, and I'm like, I don't feel like going to the doctor for that. It'll kind of go away. What is it about us because black women, they'll go to the hospital if they're not feeling right. They'll do that. They're more likely to seek help. What keeps us as black men from saying that, you know what, I'm feeling a certain way, I need professional help, I know that I need somebody, a system to reach out and discuss what's going on, I think something is wrong. What keeps us as African-American men from not taking the next step to go to the level to seeking professional help so that we can try to get rid of that and address that issue?
Okay, there's several issues that contribute to black men being hesitant about seeking any type of mental health or healthcare services. The historically speaking, from generation to generation, we do have the understanding of the fact of, as black people as a whole, particularly black men, we have never trusted the system in regards to treating us for illnesses and so forth. We have a kind of an innate fear of being mistreated, as far as, there are countless amount of issues in which black men have went to the hospital and other things where they think there's some form of medical malpractice. There's all type of scientific experiments and so forth that have been done to black men, and information about that has been pervasive as far as the spreading of that information, as far as how black men have been treated in mental health and in medical, as far as historically in the medical field. So that's one, that the fact of we feel that we're going outside of the system to get something that may mistreat us, misdiagnose us. For example, I did an interview with a guy that talked about this was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, where he was in he was in a mental health hospital for 12 years and felt that he was mistreated and he was misdiagnosed. And until this day, and that happened over 20, 30 years ago, until this day, that experience is runs deep with him. And so there are a lot of black men that don't trust the medical system. They don't trust the system outside of ourselves. Another thing that I think is important that we should understand is that when Black men go to seek these services, they would like to see people that look like us. They would like to see Black men. And Black men are probably more prone to trust Black men. I know for a fact with me as a therapist, 99% of the Black men that I treat for mental health services sought me because they wanted to hear from another Black man. They didn't want to hear from a Black woman. They didn't want to hear from a white woman, a white man, or anybody. They wanted to hear from a Black man, and they feel that a Black man could understand them better and would know where they're coming from and could treat them. That's just their preference. And so we have to look at that. Thirdly, you have to look at the fact of, due to the fact of the feminization and the attack of the masculinity of Black men, going to get health services in itself is a form of making you feel weaker in a sense, or making you feel somewhat in need or dependent on somebody else. And so when you look at the pendulum of that occurring in itself, we have a prideful mindset as it relates to seeking help for anything. You know, we're less prone to want to seek the help of others, particularly, again, if it's other people outside of our community. So when you look at the historical precedents, when you look at the medical malpractice and medical mistreatment, and so on, and then also the fact that we want to see other people like ourselves, the lack of that, and then on top of that, the fact of us being prideful, the fact of it's almost as if I'm appearing weak, and so on, and things of that sort, and also the shit is expensive,
right?
And a lot of guys they look at the expenses of it. So those things in itself, in combination, for a lot of Black men, deem us to be, less likely to seek those services, even in a situation where it's at our detriment, where we usually wait too late to seek those services at a point where it's really nothing else you can do, But that's usually the case for a lot of Black men as far as seeking healthcare and mental health services. I think those are the primary factors that contribute to that.
Because even the infamous or famous rather, Umar Johnson said that in the educational system, a lot of Black men have been put into special education classes that are not in special education. So it just already would make sense that an African American would deem it necessary not to trust the same system that he feels is trying to lock him up, that's trying to belittle him.
Right.
He says it's better on the, and also I also think that there's a belief that a lot of Black men feel that don't nobody care. Do you believe that that's also?
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, I do think that there is a certain level of apathy in our community when it comes, that actually doesn't start as a Black man. I think there's a certain apathy for Black males, particularly as young Black males, that occurs from the time you're able to speak and walk and have an opinion about things. There is a certain level of not respecting or not, I would say, giving these young boys the attention and the development that they need, and assuming that because you are a boy, certain things don't apply, or you're supposed to shake it off, or you're supposed to just know better and do better, as opposed to our females. They give them more direct attention that constitute teaching, development, fostering in them, in a sense, to do better. And a lot of times, a lot of young Black males, because I look at it at this point, when these men develop this type of mindset and behavior is developed over time. And so the neglectfulness of young Black males leads to unproductive young Black men. And I think that is quite evident when we look at the amount of funding and different government things, entitlements and agencies and capital that's more female driven on purpose, by the way, to basically arrest the development of young Black men or young Black boys and contribute to young or black women appearing to be more successful as far as optics. They appear to be, but in all actuality, when you really look at the statistics, it really doesn't say that, but the optics shows that. So what we're having is that when you look at, I'm gonna give you an example. Yes, Dr. Umar talks about that, and that was one reason why I was drawn in, because the things that he were talking about were things that I innately experienced early in my practice, where I'm seeing 5, 6, 7-year-old boys giving labels, giving behavioral disorders such as ADHD and ADD and so on, giving these behavioral labels or these behavioral disorder diagnoses that don't necessarily have those issues, but because of other stressors that are happening in their household as it relates to family issues, witnessing drugs, PTSD, violence. When they come into a classroom or into another setting, they bring that level of dysfunction into the classroom. A lot of that stuff a lot of those behaviors were developed prior to school. So if you grow up in a maladaptive, neglectful, poor family structure, you're going to bring that behavior and everything you were supposed to learn and didn't learn to the school. And so what ends up happening when these kids behave and they're out of control, and the fact that they're black, that they're also what I would say stereotyped and so forth, again goes back to the neglect of trying to do some form of behavior intervention, finding out what they're thinking and feeling and what contribute to these behaviors. They don't want to go through that. They feel like, hey, we're just going to label them as ADHD, ADD, give them medicine. This is the quick way to deal with this and get them out my class. And that has been the experience for a lot of young black males in school, as feeling like an outsider and quickly given these labels, being mistreated or being treated differently, and in some way feeling isolated from everyone else. And so to me, when you look at it, as far as the institutions that black boys have to matriculate through from elementary school, middle school, high school, it comes from a sense of anxiety as far as a sense of belonging and a sense of fitting in. So of course, when you become older, you're going to not trust these other services and other areas, because you've never been treated in a way to make you feel like you belong. And so, and I'm also say this, and this is something that's not talked about, and I'm not trying to bash on women when it comes to this, but there are a lot of situations in which the black females in the household, I know it's nothing to do with the topic, they have contributed to their children for economic gain to be put on these medicines and given diagnoses to get governmental checks and so forth. I've seen that happen a lot too. That's not talked a lot in the space, but that does happen. And I know particularly, I saw a lot of that in the late 90s and early 2000s. It happens. I saw it it is not as prevalent as it was back then, but I know it still happens. But I know for a fact in the late 90s, early 2000s and so forth, that happened a lot, where a kid was just an active kid, just a rambunctious, active, masculine child. And they're trying to hinder that child from being himself, instead of trying to curtailing the curriculum and the environment to the child. They want the child to change for the environment. And I'm sorry, when you're dealing with children and that level of their psychosocial development, that doesn't necessarily work well. So, and I'm gonna say this, as far as with DMX, if you're a person that's been exposed to drugs that early, I'm talking weed, he said he was tricked into crack and all this other stuff like that. We don't know what else he experimented with, and so forth. And so all of that in itself, when you take drugs, it automatically hinders, because it kills brain cells. It hinders it hinders your psychological development and maturity. It hinders it. It hinders your ability to reason. It hinders your ability to problem solve. And so, so those are the things. So basically, you took a person with arrested development. They became popular, famous, writing rhymes. He had a unique style about himself.
Right.
Somewhat hyper masculine and rough and all that stuff with the Rough Riders and all that stuff. But when you compound that with the fact that you're making money for this,
right,
that gives you more opportunity to buy more drugs and do a lot of the crazy stuff that you was already doing.
Right. That's. Now let me ask you this, because that's definitely true about DMX. What are some of the signs that, and I know we're talking about, there are many different psychiatric disorders that you deal with, obviously, and many different drugs and antipsychotics and SSRIs and SNRIs, all kind of different things, right? So we're not going to go there. But what are some of the signs typically? And if we could put, like you said, comorbid, I mean, which is, a few disease and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that notice about yourself that at this point, okay, I should seek some help? These are some of the signs that I probably need to seek some type of therapy or some type of help. What are some of the basic things as a Black man that you see, like, you know what, I might be doing okay, but these are some signs I need to get professional help.
Okay. As Black men, and I have this discussion with Black men a lot, as far as how should I assess my functionality as it relates to my mental health, and how if could I know if something is wrong with me or not, or if I'm not doing certain things. And so one of the first signs, in a sense, that you may potentially have some level of mental illness or symptoms and so forth, is if you notice that you're not being as productive as you once were. If you notice that, when you're at work, you're not necessarily doing things as quickly. You're finding yourself putting more effort to do things that you felt that you were doing effortlessly. Okay. Also, you want to look at the fact that, has there been any disruption in your eating patterns and your sleeping patterns? When I talk to psychiatrists a lot, usually when I've actually sat in some of those consultations with psychiatrists, I know one of the first things that a psychiatrist will talk about is there any disruption in your sleeping and eating? So you want to look at that, because what that does is tell, as far as you being able to do something that is somewhat, a necessity in life. Any human being, you have to eat, you have to sleep. And so if there's a disruption in something that's elementary as eating and sleeping, if those patterns have changed, and it doesn't matter whether you're overeating or not eating, or eating a lot less, or is a decrease in eating, or if you're oversleeping, or if you're not sleeping as much. And to me, that and when you're oversleeping, that could be a sense of you being lethargic, exhaustion, drained, and so forth. If you're undersleeping or not sleeping as much, and some levels of insomnia per se, then that can be conducive to the fact that you're irritable. There may be some things that there's some level of anxiety going on, that you're stressed, and those things in itself is contributing to the fact that you can't get the rest that you properly need. Another thing that we also want to look at is that when we assess a person, or let's say you notice yourself, if you notice other people, and I know this may be the most difficult part, because I know as Black men, we could be a bit hard-headed as far as when people say things about us that we don't want to hear and see. But if you notice that those that are close to you, that care about you, are noticing changes in your behavior.
Say it again. That's important.
If those that are close,
go ahead.
If they're verbalizing to you that, hey, we notice, man, your facial expressions, the way you talk, or the way you carry yourself is not the same, that may be a key indicator that something is not right. Something needs to be looked at. You may need the proper help. When people are consistently telling you this, and particularly if someone is telling you this for over 30 days or more, but they constantly telling you this, where you may need to check. We notice you're getting angry a lot quicker. We notice that you no longer do pleasurable activities. We're noticing that your mood is changing a lot. Your voice, your facial expression, you seem sensitive about certain things. And if they're repetitively telling you this for over 30 days, then that may be a sign that, hey, I may need to see somebody, I may need to get some help and try to alleviate that problem.
Okay. Let me ask you this, because I won't keep you too long, but the brothers out there that would be interested in, finding out, because obviously, black male therapists is something that, we definitely need and things like that. Just briefly talk about the content that you have on your channel, and why, who is to say why should somebody subscribe to Derell? What would you tell them? Like, what will be the benefit of subscribing to your channel that deals with mental health?
Okay, my channel that specifically deals with mental health, the positives of it and the benefits are insurmountable, because number one, I'm a highly qualified mental health provider that's wanted throughout the country for the most part. I have clients from each coast to another, particularly now that I would say due to the advent of COVID and so forth, I have people that seek me from New York to California. Also, the fact that I have over 18 years of experience in mental health. I've been licensed in the state of Texas since 2016, and almost 15 years. I bring a lot of experience and clinical knowledge that you're not going to hear, that actually, in many instances, is going to relate specifically to Black men. I do talk about the Black community as a whole, but I'm going to give you information in which I will speak to you in a clinical perspective, but I also can relate to you in layman's terms, or in the level that you're coming from at the point of initially hearing me. Also, the fact that I provide services for our community. I know all the integral pieces in regards to what Black men deal with, or what Black people deal with as it relates to mental health and struggling with it in day to day. My practice, and I made a reputation of providing services for the most severe forms of mental illness and people who are low end functioning. There are a lot of people who make way more money than I do that basically deal with people that are high end, high level insurances, or they're paying cash, or they're in certain areas where that's very affluent, and they deal with, I don't find pleasure in counseling people, and I'm not trying to, no offense to this, but people who want pet therapy, or they're grieving over their pets. And I can actually make way more money dealing with issues like that are, to me, I find not as severe as someone who grew up in a home where he was traumatically, sexually, or physically abused by his mother and dad, had drug issues, ongoing issues with relationships, and now they're 30, 40 years old with no direction, and they have, several mental health diagnoses and so forth, and they're out of control. So I take it upon myself, as far as I take pride in the fact that I like to work with the people who are at the lowest level of functioning and help them heal. I get a lot of pleasure of helping people heal and reaching a higher level. So my channel itself is reflective of that journey of how I go about doing that. And in turn, I speak of a lot of issues that are relevant to that, and also is relevant to what you may see and hear on YouTube and other social media outlets, in which I focus on things that directly deal with us, or that may be even exclusive to what a lot of the Black community deals with. So you're gonna hear a lot of terminology that you may have to look up, and I'm going to explain it to you. I focus a lot on the illnesses that I know that affect our community, particularly with children, behavioral disorders, and so forth. When we're looking at, as far as adults, as far as with Black men are depressed. A lot of Black men have PTSD, and so forth. A lot of Black men have major depressive disorder, particularly homeless Black men, a lot of schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. So I speak on those things. Excuse me. I speak on those things. I also may speak on, for those that may have some social anxiety issues, I may speak on other anxiety issues and so forth. But I speak on it in a perspective through the lens of a person who relates to you, and I will give situations and experiences that are reflective of what other Black men go through. Because sometimes the presentation of one illness from a cultural standpoint may look a little different. If I see a Hispanic person with schizophrenia, they may say and do some things that may be conducive to their culture. For Black people, they say and do things that's also conducive and relative to the culture that that we deal with, and also the fact that as far as this is not talked about, the influence of discrimination and racism that produce extra stress to Black men. And that's one of the reasons why Black men, that we have a shorter lifespan than in every other demographic. That's because we're the most, in a lot of sense, we're overworked and we're stressed from a psychological and physical standpoint. And to me, that is also very unique to us as it relates to other different groups. So as an African-American male, I relate to that. I understand that. I had a father that also, he was a workaholic and he was stressed. I've seen other men in my family and so forth that carried that same situation. And I think that is highly related to what Black men experience. And you're gonna hear that. Also, I talk about things in regards to marriage, relation. I covered the spectrum as it relates to Black culture. And so, and again, fundamentally, I will speak from a theoretical standpoint because that channel is purely mental health. So I will speak from a theoretical standpoint, but then I also will modify and relate it to the community itself.
All right. Well, God, definitely thank you for coming by. Check out Derell Life Solutions on the first comment pinned to the top, guys. I really thank you for your participation today. Check out all the information there. And as you guys know, the buffoonery remains at an all-time high. I'm out.
Peace.